President Trump has released his first draft of his first budget resolution, or his first budget, I should say, and it's heavy on cuts except for defense and homeland security. But entitlements like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are not touched. The EPA, State Department, Labor, and Agriculture would all be hit the hardest. All have double-digit cuts to them. That means environmental programs to curb pollution would get slashed. U.S. contributions to the United Nations would take a big hit. Job training programs for seniors and the disabled would be reduced or eliminated. And Meals on Wheels would take big cuts. There are also too many other things to even name that would just absolutely be gone. But I'll name a few more programs that would get totally eliminated for you. The UN Climate Change Program, the Global Climate Change Initiative, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Arts, Minority Business Development Agency, and even subsidies for Amtrak. But defense and homeland security would each see big increases. Part of that would go towards the wall that Mexico is supposed to pay for, but they're not going to. A lot would go towards hiring more border agents. Some would go towards buying more planes and more warships. Politico says this spending plan is ripped right from Steve Bannon's nationalistic playbook. And let me start with that as the first question, Bill. What does this budget, and we know that this is an opening salvo and it goes back and forth and Congress gets theirs.
Doesn't go back and forth. This is going into an echo chamber. It's going into this isn't Steve Bannon's budget. This is Paul Ryan's budget. This is the hard right-wing Republican attack on social programs, on the discretionary budget, and it may be that they can jam this thing through, but it's going to erode. It's a mistake for Trump to become a disciple of Paul Ryan.
But Bill O'Reilly, as I was saying before, what does this tell us about Trump's priorities, and what does this tell us about Trump?
I say cut away. Go ahead and cut away. And maybe you can cut around some things that are really important. There's so much money wasted in Washington. I'd like to see a smaller Washington by far. Cut away. The trouble here is that it doesn't really go after the main spending problems, which are the entitlement programs. Those are the things, they're third rails. He's not touching them. Those are the things that need to get touched because they need to get saved.
EPA, we're wasting money on environmental protection?
You can find plenty to cut in any of those agencies. You can find plenty to cut.
Curbing pollution.
You probably have 17 programs to do the same thing.
The United Nations for climate
anything with
change.
the UN, slice it right out. Just cut it right up.
Why?
Because the UN is like in triplicate. It's a complete waste of money. The UN is so damn corrupt. It's so bureaucratic. Cut it.
Meals on Wheels.
Meals on Wheels. Like you can cut around that one. I'd like to see people
for Public
fed.
Broadcasting. Got a problem with Big Bird?
Big Bird can survive on his own. Big Bird can survive. He's got a Big Bird is you go to the store, you buy Big Bird on a box of Triscuits. Big Bird doesn't need government money.
Big Bird Sesame Street does.
No, it doesn't.
Sesame Street doesn't own Big Bird.
It can survive on its own. The reason you did public broadcasting because you had 4 networks. Now you've got like 8,000 media outlets. You don't need.
How do you know that the public broadcasting can survive?
Because you could start a network tomorrow. I could run one in my basement tomorrow.
The answer is you don't.
With similar reach.
All right. This is all freeing up money for defense spending and homeland security spending. The U.S. already spends more than the next 12 countries in the world combined on its defense spending. Was there a real yearning out there for increased defense spending?
Office. There's in the hard right wing of the Republican Party. He just quit the Conservative Party and joined the Republican Party. A conservative would want to conserve the environment. A conservative would want to make sure that senior citizens have enough to eat. Now, what you have is a triumph of ideology over both practical politics and practical policy. They may be able to get the votes for this, but there's going to be a lot of unhappy Americans.
There's so much overlap in Washington that can get cut. I'm not saying take Meals on Wheels away, maybe move it to states, whatever. There's so much money that's getting wasted in Washington. Cut it. I'm finally glad to see it get cut.
Dominic, the president campaigned on an America First agenda. He wants to, but the military is kind of used to hammer other countries. I mean, yeah, there's the defensive aspect about it, but it's also cutting all these programs for Americans.
Well, I agree with your assessment. But Mr. Brodsky is correct, unfortunately, that this comes right out of the Paul Ryan playbook and right out of the Republican talking points. And one of the things that I find disgusting, the Trump folks today are saying, see, well, the public backs this because they voted for him. So I guess there is an argument to be made for that. But I would say that the public voted for the personality of a Donald Trump. They didn't vote for these draconian budget cuts. The one thing I disagree with you on, and that Andrew was correct the way he set this up, you have to understand, and this is why folks hate politics and politicians. I said it, Mr. Brodsky. This is why folks hate.
He's not
This
a
is why
politician
folks.
anymore.
That's right. He's not.
Stop helping me.
Okay. This is why folks hate politicians. So while folks are being alarmed at home, I want you to just stop for a second and calm down, because this is no joke. When you're talking about cutting Meals on Wheels, our grandmothers, oftentimes, this is the only way they have to eat. And these phony politicians are talking about cutting it. But what I want folks to understand is that this is all part of the budget process. A president or any chief executive, the mayor of New York, the county executive of Westchester, they come with draconian cuts unless it's an election year. Let me just finish. Let me just finish.
A draconian increase.
Okay, well, they come with these horrible cuts, and then the programs are restored
Wait a minute.
by the
Dominic,
legislature or
Dominic,
by Congress.
there used to be bipartisanship in the legislature. The Republicans
That's true.
have control of the Senate. Paul Ryan's going to restore money for Meals on Wheels?
You and I both
the-
know that
It also
half of
comes down
these
to state
programs,
money, local money. Meals on Wheels is not just a federal program.
right?
It's a small piece of it.
But I think we all know at this table that many of these cuts will be restored.
By who?
The Democrats fighting by
By
moderates.
Democrats? They don't control. They're minorities.
We're not going to see you. Okay, what you disagree that chief executives put forth these cuts, these budgets with severe cuts, and then they're restored year after
Sometimes
year. We
when
see
there's
this.
a bipartisan government, that happens. It happened in New York quite a bit because you had either a Republican governor, a Democratic assembly, or a Democratic governor and a Republican Senate. And it was handled most often on education spending. But to pretend that that model now applies to Washington, D.C. is foolish.
It's another point that I want to get to, and we looked at some of the departments and the cuts. The EPA, labor, agriculture, these are agencies or departments that do a lot of regulating. They regulate a lot of businesses. They tell you, and we know that Trump has started a war on regulation. He wants 2 regulations repealed for every new regulation that's out there, in the name of saving money for businesses, because the argument is that it's too difficult for the business climate.
In the name of businesses flourishing again, in the name of cutting the regulations to let the business flourish.
At what cost to make that buck? I mean, one of the first regulations that got repealed was letting coal companies pollute into rivers. I mean, that's the definition of penny wise and pound foolish. It'll make that company a little bit more money, and it'll just, who cares about the impact it has on the environment or the people downriver?
Well, you have these jobs going overseas because the regulations aren't as onerous
Coal
overseas.
mines jobs going overseas?
No, I'm talking about lots of different industries. Lots
Bill,
of different industries.
but like the good Republican you really are,
Right.
when someone asks you a hard
what did
question,
people
you
not
change the subject
What did
and
peop-
go back to your talking points.
What did people not get about Donald Trump? He said he was going to support clean coal and coal miners in Kentucky, around the country.
I didn't say he
ran on it. So
I
did
don't
Hillary.
say he lied.
So
I
did
said it's a
Hillary.
bad idea.
But I just want to ask this one question. Honestly, because I know you as a straight shooter,
Yeah.
do you think folks voted for him because of personality? Do you really think they were listening to 90% of what Donald Trump said?
I think they voted for him because they were so sick of the politicians in Washington, and they wanted someone to be the greatest irritant in the world to them. And he's doing it right now.
But
with
he
the
also
programs.
never said how he was going to do it.
I'm
going
not
to
a
be
Trump guy, but I don't,
I'm going to be fantastic for
We
business.
can't aff-
businesses
we
are
can't
going to
afford everything.
Businesses are going to do remarkably well, but he didn't say because we're going to let them pollute and potentially ruin your health and certainly ruin the environment.
Of course, we need some regulations. We need regulations on the food industry. Yes, we need environmental regulation. Yes, but we
But
overdo.
Bill, that's going to cost businesses money. That's going to cost
Mr.
jobs.
Whitman, let me
It's
just
not-
break
it's not
this
all one or the
down
other.
real simple. Mr. Trump is looking out for his boys. It's as simple as that. No, I'm serious.
his
I'm
sons
serious.
or-
No. When I say his boys, meaning his friends, his allies, let me just finish, that are fellow business owners, and they view this as this is their time, now or never. So now that he's president, I mean, this is not surprising or shocking. He's looking out for his boys.
He's kept some big promises here. He isn't touching, as Bill points out, Medicare, Medicaid, where the big spending is. He's focusing all his savings on a very small portion of the federal budget that deals largely in human services, cultural matters, and public health and safety.
It's actually not a lot of money. You're exactly right.
And at the same time, he's not a cut spending guy. He isn't cutting spending. He's shifting spending.
Right. Right.
Okay?
He's shifting it
The
from these
notion
services
that
to.
we want a smaller Washington, which is Bill's, again, one of these inane talking points that has no content. He's not doing that. He's shifting the money. And if you want,
Oh, I'm perfectly aware of that. I mean,
is that a good thing? Does that make him
I have no problem with
a
it putting some
smaller government?
money into defense is fine. Homeland
So
security
you're
is
not
fine.
for a smaller government. You're
I'm for a smaller government. I'm for fewer federal departments. I'm for reducing or getting rid of Department of Education. All these things. Bring it back to the states.
But
Bring it to the
then
states.
taking that money and spending it on something else. The government itself is not shrinking.
I would rather
do we
spend,
agree?
I would rather spend less money than we're spending right now.
But he doesn't do that, does
He's
he?
not doing that. No, that's correct. Yeah.
No further questions. Let's move on.
He's also not touching.
Counselor?
He's not touching entitlements in this budget. He certainly is in the health care bill that went through.
Well,
Or that is
We don't know what's
in
gonna happen with
process.
that.
interestingly enough, that's one of the few areas where he's flat broken a promise. What he said is no one would lose health care. Now he's got a bill that said that, by even Paul Ryan's admission, takes health care from 24 million Americans and cuts taxes for the richest of Americans. There's Trump breaking a promise.
gonna
Last
back
word,
off.
Bill.
I think he's going to back off of that. I think he's going to
I
chicken
agree.
out.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Very nice last word. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, the first Republican from our region votes on the GOP health care plan, and he votes yes. Why that could be rather telling about whether this thing will succeed or fail.